Instagram, YouTube, Pinterest, Wikipedia, Snapchat. Combined, they can be described as weapons. Weapons of mass distraction. And I suspect you know how it works. You got the barbecue all fired up, and the meat is ready to go on. And you hear a ping from your smartphone, and you say to yourself, okay, well, while the steak's on the grill, I'll see what that notification is all about. Oh no, what's the matter with that guy? He's totally wrong, and I've got to reply to this post. That cat picture is pretty cute. Oh, and what a cool video. And that other video on the thumbnail looks interesting too. That guy replied to my post, and he's really got it wrong now. Wow, this Wikipedia article has a lot of cool information. And meanwhile, out on the patio is a 4-alarm fire. I guess I'll be microwaving tonight. Journalist Shankar Venedin knows that most of us react to the beeps and buzzes of our phones with a great sense of urgency, like parents responding to a baby's cry. And although we know that this isn't healthy, nor is it sane, we do it anyway. But now research is showing that we really should make an effort to avoid distractions. When it comes to being lost in social media, and when we get lost in email, we lose our ability to focus. In his Hidden Brain podcast, aired last July, Venedin profiles Cal Newport. Cal Newport is a computer scientist at Georgetown University and the author of a book called Deep Work: Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World. Newport believes that we should minimize the problems created by constant interruptions. And he insists that it's more urgent than people realize. So here's the problem. When we let emails or social media guide our workday, we're weakening our ability to do the most challenging kind of work, what Newport calls deep work. Deep work is the work that it requires sustained attention, such as writing a report or solving an engineering problem or doing some significant research. The solution to distractions, according to Newport, is to do what we can to set aside long portions of many days to focus on deeper thinking. This means no social media, limited email, and strict limits on appointments. The result is a life that is richer and more humane and human than a life of robotically responding to emails and clicking on websites, which is what many of us wind up doing for the bulk of the day. In today's Old Testament reading, God challenges a righteous man named Job. Challenges him to do the deep work of answering the question of who he is in relation to God. Now, this is not a question that can be answered by a quick Google search, because it requires deep thinking. It requires thinking about what it means to be a human being created by God. The challenge that God gives Job is also a challenge that is given to us. One that pushes us to unplug ourselves long enough to ask and answer some very deep questions. For starters, who is God? Now, that's a big one. And if we do that Google search, we find that God is described as holy, love, Father, Jesus, Spirit, Almighty, omnipotent, merciful, and the list goes on. None of these answers is wrong, but such answers can be distracting. Too much information. In the book of Job, God keeps things much simpler. When he speaks to Job out of the whirlwind, God asks, "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth?" In other words, where were you, Job, when I, God, laid the foundation of the earth? Both the you and the I are critically important. In his book, The Institutes of the Christian Religion, Protestant reformer John Calvin unveils one of the guiding principles found in his theology, his view of duplex cognito domini, the twofold knowledge of God. Calvin argues that our knowledge of God consists of two parts: knowing God as Creator and knowing God as Redeemer. Anchored to this is our knowledge of ourselves. Knowledge of God and knowledge of ourselves are connected. They are interrelated. And according to Calvin, we cannot have one without the other. Calvin begins by saying that without knowledge of self, there is no knowledge of God. That's why God asks Job from the whirlwind, "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding." Knowledge of self and knowledge of God are both important. Who determined its measurements, God asks. Surely you know, or who stretched the line upon it? On what were the bases sunk, or who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the heavenly beings shouted for joy? Princeton has a journal that they produce quarterly. It's titled Interpretation. And in July of 1999, Pastor Tom Hare points out that the voice in the whirlwind asks a series of questions that Job simply cannot answer. Job does not know the answers because he is finite. Only the infinite God knows. This, quote, is perhaps the first word from the whirlwind. Job is creature, not creator. We need to hear this because our high-tech world regards some people as godlike. Peter Thiel, one of Silicon Valley's high-tech priests, recently said to the Times Literary Supplement, quote, "Humans are distinguished from other species by our ability to work miracles. We call these miracles technology." Let's pray. Father God, we pray that you would be in the midst of that circumstance, that you would tend to the needs of those that are in distress, guard the lives of those that respond, and may your presence be manifested. We pray this in the name and for the sake of Jesus. Amen. technology can involve polluting factories, narrow corporate interests, and the marketing of personal information in a way that can hurt us as well as help us. Only God is the creator. In fact, that was the original sin, wasn't it? This confusion of the creator and created. Didn't the evil one say to Adam and Eve, are you sure that you can't have those attributes? Only God is the creator. And humans can be creative, and we can certainly develop marvelous technology, but we simply cannot work miracles. We were not present when God laid the foundations of the earth. So we cannot do God's miraculous work. God is the creator of all that is, including us. So the deep question, who is God, can be answered with the word creator. But how about the question, who are we? What does it mean for us to be human creatures? God answers this in part as the one who has put wisdom in the inward parts and given understanding to the mind. As creatures who are made in the image of God, we are people who have been given wisdom and understanding by the Creator. When we do deep work, we realize that we do not have all of the answers. Only God does. But we can have wisdom, we can have understanding, and we can have the ability to search for answers as we live in relationship with God and in relationship with one another. Reverend R. writes, quote, "The world is complex and painful, but the God who laid the foundations of the world did so in order that there might be a world and so that we might be in it." End quote. Our Creator wants us to live in a relationship with the divine and to share the wisdom, understanding, and the love of the divine. The brilliant theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking died last March at the age of 76. He spent his entire career exploring the universe. He inspired many people with his intelligence and his humor and his insights into the Big Bang. The Big Bang, which many people believe happened when God laid the foundation of the earth. Hawking knew how to focus and was a man who was always looking for wisdom and understanding. He also had a crippling disease. At the age of 21, Hawking was diagnosed with ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. And after a throat operation in the mid-80s, he designed an electronic voice system. And this system eventually allowed him to enjoy sophisticated computerized communication. And although Hawking depended and relied on a wheelchair and a voice system, he was always connected to others. The science professor, Helene Mallet, said in The Atlantic back in 2018, quote, "He was like all of us, all too human, and always dependent on others, whether humans or machines." End quote. The life of Stephen Hawking reminds us that none of us acts alone. In fact, our being and our acting require a network of complex support. The question, who are we, can be answered in part with the word social. We are social animals, created by God to be in a relationship with God ourselves, but we need the support and the accountability of others. Fortunately, God has created a world in which we are wonderfully interconnected. A world in which God provides for all creatures, from people to lions to ravens. The Apostle Paul built on this understanding when he said that the church was a body, and that we, who are many, are one body in Christ, and individually we are members of one another. All of this comes from God, who has put wisdom in the inward parts and given understanding to the mind. When we go deep for answers, we discover that our Creator is the source of all wisdom and all understanding. Calvin knew this, saying the endowments which we possess cannot possibly be from ourselves. Our very being is nothing else than subsistence in God alone. Knowledge of God as Creator. Knowledge of ourselves as social beings, connected to God and with each other. When we put these two together, we are doing the deep work that God wants us to do. Let us pray. Merciful and gracious God, may we ever be mindful. In gratitude, may we express our creatureliness. And in praise, may we declare you our Creator God. So be with us these days. Be with us in these times. We pray this in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.